Hello, everyone. I think we'll start now. Thanks all for joining. Very good morning or good afternoon to every one of you, depending on from where you are joining. So myself, Vibhor Mittal, I am Director at Aptiva for Risk Management and Client Relationships, primarily in the Middle East region. We have with us Mr. Satya Vemireddy, who is Director for Balance Sheet Analytics and Solutions. And we have Ashley Cherian, who is Director for Credit Risk and Portfolio Analytics. So we have a balanced team today to give you a walkthrough on the integrated stress testing framework, how we can apply it in the time of COVID-19 for impact assessment. And we'll touch upon the general framework as well as some of the specific trends and points we see that banks or any other financial institutions are applying to assess their COVID-19 situation. So as you all know, we are currently grappling with the biggest, probably biggest black swan event of our lifetime, which is COVID-19. So most of the financial institutions, they are continuing to do their best to provide essential services, but of course they have to bear the direct and indirect repercussions of this economic event. So not only banks, but also the central banks are monitoring the situation very closely, and they have announced various relief measures in form of stimulus packages, relaxed regulations, and so forth. So in this kind of a situation, which is very rapidly evolving and the future is uncertain, it is very important for not only for regulators, but also the senior management to be on the top of risks in their portfolios. And one of the most potent tools that we think the banks have in their arsenal is stress testing, because it allows them to not only simulate the historical scenarios, but it also allows banks and financial institutions to simulate multiple hypothetical scenarios, which is ideal in current situation where you don't know how the situation will evolve in the near future. So the objective of today's webinar is to provide a practitioner's view on how the stress testing practices have evolved, the related challenges, along with the roadmap to the integrated stress testing framework, so that you can apply these in times of COVID-19 crisis and continue to apply the same. So we published a paper sometime back, maybe a couple of months ago, and we would touch upon those aspects in today's webinar. So let's first discuss on how the stress testing practices have evolved in the banking industry. So we understand most of the participants today are from the various banks in Middle East, Africa, and India. So I assume all of you would be familiar with what stress testing is. So stress testing is evaluation of banks' financial position under extreme historical and plausible hypothetical scenarios. So we are talking of both historical. When we say historical, we mean maybe repeat of 2008 financial crisis, 2001 crisis, or the Asian financial crisis, and any war scenarios, or any kind of hypothetical scenarios which you think may happen in near future. So it has become a key aspect of both risk management, regulatory supervision, as well as banks' internal decision making in current scenario. So this tool was introduced primarily within the regulatory framework around 2006 and 7, when as part of the Pillar 2 framework, and the main objective was to address the shortcomings of Pillar 1 framework in the bank's regulatory scenarios. So in terms of evolution, what we have seen in terms of stress testing, the first and foremost is that the stress testing has evolved. So earlier when it started, banks were using more judgmental thumb rule based of sensitivity scenario. We have now seen that banks have now matured where they are using more sophisticated analytical models for the stress testing. So be it in advanced geographies where you have dedicated stress testing exercise like CCAR in US or in Europe. We now have similar stress testing in various geographies which are driven by regulator. And a lot of the banks have already matured to various analytical models that are being used as part of credit risk, liquidity risk, or market risk practices. So those models have also kind of are being used within the stress testing practices. So the other change that we see is the incorporation of scenario analysis and reverse stress testing. So earlier, the focus was on simple what if analysis, what we used to call sensitivity analysis, where you just were testing what is the impact of some rating downgrade, or what is the impact of FX shock, or what is the impact of any interest rate shifts, for example. But now the focus is on testing scenarios. By scenario, I mean, let's say COVID-19, what happens if COVID-19 continue for Q3, or any kind of recession, global recession or the regional recession kind of scenarios, where you are analyzing a lot of multiple risk factors in parallel and seeing the combined impact of all these factors on your balance sheet. And the other aspect is on reverse stress testing. So one aspect is where you are trying to assess the impact of risk factors on key metrics like capital, liquidity, and P ratios. The other is you see that what is my break-even point for these critical metrics or regulatory ratios like capital and liquidity, and what could be the scenarios where those points, these ratios can be breached. So what are the scenarios where I become insolvent? So what is the probability of default at which my capital adequacy ratio will come down to the regulatory level? Or what is the runoffs in deposit at which my liquidity ratio will fall below the regulatory or the management defined risk appetite? So that is known as reverse stress testing. So you now do both so that you get both top down and bottom of view of your book. And the other impact that we have seen is that earlier the stress testing was carried out in silo, where the credit risk team or the wholesale or retail team are doing their own stress test, market risk team and ALM teams are doing their own stress test, and operational risk has their own scenarios. And all of them were combined, either aggregated using some probability weighted approach, or randomly aggregated using correlation scopula, or just added. Now we see that adds a lot of duplication of charge that doesn't give any complete picture to the management. So one of the focus area is now integrated approach, and banks want to see the combined impact of all these analysis on the key ratio, which is more realistic. There is no duplication in terms of capital charge that you have assumed, and you incorporate all the linkages. The other change we see is the strong governance. So stress testing is not limited to 1 or 2 persons in risk or finance department. There is a greater involvement of senior management of board in defining the scenarios, in challenging the assumptions. A lot of banks have model validation frameworks being built in on top of these. There are economists in large banks who have also been now part of these exercises, and they play a critical role in terms of defining the various risk inputs and forecasts. So in terms of stress testing, so one of the key advantage for stress testing comes when you try to link it with your business, capital, or recovery or management action plans. So stress testing should not be only seen as a regulatory exercise, and it is a critical tool for your management only when you are able to link it with business, capital, and recovery plans. So management doesn't understand the technical language of risk. They want to see what is the impact on my liquidity ratios, right? What is the growth that I can assume on my balance sheet and remain on top of the CAR ratio? What could be the dividend that the bank could afford to pay out? What are the contingency plans that we should have in place? So we have to talk the language of the business people to be able to understand, so that they are able to understand the impact of stress testing on their balance sheet, and they see it not as a regulatory tool, but as a decision-making tool. The other aspect that we have seen in various geographies is several regulators realize that if banks are left to design their own frameworks and scenario, it is very difficult to do a peer comparison. So we have seen that in many geographies, central banks came out with standardized frameworks for stress testing, where they define certain principles or scenarios or stress tests in certain cases, or standardized data definitions so that the outputs could be compared. So how it goes is that banks have to at least mandatorily follow the standardized frameworks of stress testing if they are provided, On top of that, the banks design their own internal frameworks or internal scenarios for their management purposes. The other changes that we see in the risk management that have impact on stress testing is the advent of new lot of regulations in recent past. So we have seen Basel III undergoing various changes, and now we are seeing a new Basel III will be rolled out in a couple of years, which we also call Basel IV. We have counterparty credit risk regulations, interest rate risk and banking book regulations, which we call it as BCBS 368. We had IFRS 9, we had ILAP, which is liquidity equivalent of ICAP that we do on capital. So what has happened is these regulations have a lot of elements of risk analytics, and banks have developed very sophisticated risk analytics frameworks or models or tools which overlap with the existing stress testing frameworks also. So there is a big scope of alignment there where these tools, their scenarios and the shocks that are being assumed within each of these regulations can be harmonized with your overall stress testing framework. So there is a big scope of alignment, and we see a lot of banks are now currently working on harmonizing these risk analytics engines. So to cut the long story short, the key need of the hour is integrated stress testing framework where the scenarios, the data, the risk models across the organization are linked on the basis of their interdependencies. So that's the focus of today's webinar. Also that how you can build an integrated stress testing framework, leveraging your existing tools and models that you have within the bank. So before we go into the stress testing framework, we would like to touch upon some aspects of COVID-19 impact, and then we will talk about how to build these points within your stress testing framework. So most of the participants who registered today, we received a lot of queries on how they can take COVID-19 impact into their stress testing regulations, how can they provide useful reports to their management. So some of the points that you have to consider when developing or doing stress testing framework or revising your stress testing framework vis-a-vis your last December run is the moratorium type. So in your country, most of the regulators have come out with certain type of moratorium programs and how it is being rolled out in your country, whether it is opt-in program where your customers have an option to choose for moratorium, or whether it is opt-out, that all of them are by default assumed to be taking the moratorium unless and until they specifically opt out. So it gives a critical input or the starting point that what kind of customers you have in your book. So if it's opt-in, you know very well that the customers who are opting in are the ones who are the stressed one. But when it is opt-out kind of a program, it becomes very difficult to identify which customers are really stressed. So you need some additional data points to be able to get that kind of info. Are there any temporary regulatory waivers on capital and liquidity buffers in your country? So in some countries, we have seen the regulators have waived off certain buffers in terms of capital conservation, or they have brought down some regulatory liquidity ratios like LCR and SFR for time being. So that allows the bank to inject or to additional liquidity into the system. They can lend out more without considering about liquidity ratios being going down. But in such cases, you need to have a plan to bring back these back to the original level as and when the regulator wants to roll them back. Government support programs for SMEs or specific income groups. So are there any specific government programs in your country where they are subsidizing or providing any money to the SMEs or to any specific income groups, which could be like unemployed people or could be poor section of the society or certain other specific industries that are important to the overall economy. So these sectors you have to identify, you have to build in identifiers for these kind of customers in your book. Whether other important factor is whether your stress testing exercise is forward-looking or post-facto. So there is no use of using the outdated data because your historical data will not yet capture the complete impact of COVID. Lots of these defaults have not yet flown into the balance sheet because of moratoriums or various other factors. So you have to be very, very forward looking. You have to simulate the stress in your book. You have to proactively downgrade the credit ratings. You have to see that the plans or the budgeting exercises that you had carried out maybe in December, you have to update them when start doing the stress testing exercise, not only for current book, but also for future. So it is very important, because whether your base numbers incorporate the impact of COVID to certain extent, or you are yet to incorporate the impact of COVID in your base numbers. Then other important aspects that we'll touch upon is how to stress macroeconomic factors like GDP growth, oil price, unemployment rates, etc. What could be the length of recovery? So you have to collect a lot of data on this. We will touch upon these aspects when we go in deep. Changes in repayment profiles, moratorium opt-in, whether your credit bureau is capturing any data, and what are the sectors and industry where you see more stress as compared to other sectors. One interesting trend that we see primarily in countries like US or etc. is the banks are exploring alternate data sets for identifying stressed customers. So for example, they are drilling, they are going in detail into the operating account transactions of the customers. So what it means, if some of the SMEs or some of the borrowers have operating account in your bank, you know whether they are paying salaries or whether they are getting salaries, depending on whether they are individual or SMEs, whether they are getting any revenues out of their customers, or those revenues have stopped, how stressed their operating accounts are. Same for your customers, whether you see salary transfers happening into the account, whether you see salary cuts with those customers. So if you have opportunity to look into the transactions, banks have this advantage, especially the large banks who operate these accounts, who also have the operating accounts, definitely have these advantage. In US, banks are also going in deep into the card spends of their customer and checking whether they are going to office, they are any taxi or petrol related spends, location analytics. So a lot of interesting work happening. So depending on whether these data sets are unemployment benefit applications is, so in US, you receive a lot of unemployment benefit applications. In the Middle East, like Saudi, we have these unemployment benefit applications. So you can identify the customers who have opted in for those, and you can identify which of these customers are stressed in your book. The other aspects that you have to cover specifically look into is the sharp drop in interest rates. So you have to relook at your repricing profile. So a simple kind of sensitivity analysis may not suffice. You have to completely reforecast your repricing profile and simulate the impact of interest rates on NIM movement, so that you capture the impact more accurately. You have to also prepare for negative rates environment, as we're seeing that rates have dropped sharply, and some of these rates are we have heard of the negative rates environment in some countries. So this is also one of the key aspects that some of the banks will have to consider. Then one of the other trend that we are seeing in some countries is reputation of bank playing a huge importance in terms of CASA deposits or current and saving accounts deposits that you have in bank. So we have seen a lot of articles where people are scared of putting their money in the smaller banks or NBFCs, and they are pulling out money from those, and they are kind of putting it into the large private sector or public sector banks, which they consider or perceive to be relatively safer. So it is very important for the bank to also maintain the messaging to the customer that we are safe, we are adequately capitalized, and these deposits are protected, to prevent this kind of situation. So this is very important for smaller banks and NBFCs in particular, because large banks, we have seen sudden influx of deposits. Some of these deposits are also coming in those countries, for example, in US and UK, where the government is transferring money and people don't have any avenues to spend this money. So these are getting accumulated, but there is a clear trend that these are getting accumulated in large or relatively safer perceived banks by the customer. The other things that you have to also consider when you do stress testing is legality of force majeure. invocations in terms of contracts, be it collateral contracts, real estate projects where you're getting incomes from rentals. So whether customers can invoke these insurance. So this is one of the key aspects which is not yet clear. So banks are taking certain assumptions, and but it is important to keep a tab of this legality. So one of the key aspect is how quick and accurately you can carry out all these simulations, and whether your current risk analytics systems or stress testing spreadsheets or systems allow you to simulate these impact of these COVID-19 risk and performance factors on your balance sheet. So it is very important that you have a framework which allows you not a very quick analysis and a very more relatively accurate analysis on risk and performance metrics that you are tracking, so that management knows how it looks vis-a-vis their risk appetite. They can have their action plans drawn accordingly. So this was a brief on COVID-19. We will now look into the key aspect of today's webinar, which is the integrated stress testing framework. So this framework that you see, this is the complete picture of how we see a bank or a financial institution should design the integrated stress testing framework. A lot of components, we will drill down into each of these components. So the entire integrated stress testing framework start with data model. So what kind of data you need to collect, what kind of analysis you need to be able to carry out a detailed stress testing framework. Then we go into scenarios design. So what scenarios, hypothetical or historical, you consider as plausible. So what all scenarios you want to keep into your data. So it also depends on which country or which geographies you are based at, and accordingly you can choose these scenarios. So scenarios is more like regional recession, global recession, and I think currently all of us are interested in COVID-19 scenario. For our Middle Eastern customers, one of the key concern could also be the low oil price, for example. Then another key component is the macroeconomic indicator. So it is one of the key component that you need lot of data, historical as well as forecasted. So what all macroeconomic indicators you are tracking and which you believe are important for your portfolio performance. So it could be GDP and these could be different for your different kind of portfolios. For example, for your wholesale book, it could be GDP or the government spending, oil price, etc. Whereas for your retail book, it could be inflation, employment rate, housing prices index, etc. Real estate prices for your collateral, and the overall credit growth in the economy. So various kind of aspects. This is not an exhaustive list, but these are some of the examples of what kind of macroeconomic indicators we have seen banks tracking. And this could be tourism if your country is based primarily on tourism and so forth. So the other aspect is how many scenarios you want to simulate. So in regulatory stress testing, we have seen banks simulating in addition to base case, at least 3 stress scenarios, which could be mild, moderate, severe, or you may be calling them with some other names in your countries. In some, you may simulate more depending on whether the management wants some more scenarios or not. But at least we recommend 2 to 3 scenarios to be simulated, so that you need to decide. Then the other aspect is what are the key risk and business factors that you want to track in your portfolio. So this we are talking of idiosyncratic risk, for example, the rating downgrades for your corporate customers. If you're using IFRS 9, the IFRS 9 stage migration for your credit book, or top corporate exposure defaults, or top sector defaults, or drop in collections, fall in collateral value. So a lot of FX shocks or delayed repayment of your loans, and operational losses, large operational losses, or any reputational event that you may be having in your bank. So you need to have a comprehensive list of such risk and business factors so that all your portfolios are fully covered, and you need to have their data in place, the historical data, etc. So once you have all the data, scenarios, indicator, risk, and business factors, the next task is to combine all of them together within a stress testing tool or an engine, and then simulate all of them. So when you simulate, you try to simulate impacts of the current COVID-19 indicators, so that you adjust your baseline BAU scenario and come up with baseline, and then you have a lot of stress scenario, not only for current but for future also. So this is a very complex simulation exercise which you are carrying out on current based numbers, as well as you are carrying out on forecasted numbers for future scenarios. And we have seen financial institutions at least carrying out this exercise on 3 to 5 year horizon. That's what regulators and best practices recommend worldwide. So this is a very complex exercise, and it also depends how sophisticated your tool or engines are to be able to support these kind of simulations and exercise. So once you carry out these computations, the end objective of stress testing exercise is to be able to compute your key metrics into your baseline and stressed conditions for as on date as well as for future forecasted dates. So you try to see what is my current CAR ratio, liquidity ratios, loan to deposit ratios, key loan default or NPL parameters, profitability, so NII impacts and economic value of equity. And you may be tracking some other ratios as per your own priority. So you need to have a framework which allows you to calculate the impact of all these factors onto all these key metrics in current as well as future scenarios. So, and once you have calculated, then comes the real importance. So if your bank or financial institution has a lot of buffer in liquidity or capital, then kind of you end the exercise here. But let's say you are a bank or financial institution where you don't have that much buffer. And once you compute this, you see that a lot of these ratios are falling below your risk appetite or below regulatory defined thresholds. Then the next section is the management action. So what actions you will do to bring down or to bring back these ratios into your risk appetite range. So there are a lot of actions which central bank itself can do. But before central bank take any actions, it is important that management itself decides what they want to do and present it to central bank and their board. So some of these aspects could be reduced growth forecasts. So you have assumed a lot of balance sheet growth numbers when you started this exercise, which could be 10% growth or 5% growth depending on GDP growth pre-COVID. But now after COVID, you see that these growth numbers are not sustainable. In fact, you see negative growth. So you need to adjust those growth forecasts in your stress testing scenario. Then you have to plan for issuance of additional tier 1 or tier 2 capital because if you are having any shortfall, that could be one of the key steps. Reduce OPEX and CAPEX. So this we are already seeing that not only banks, all kind of institutions have cut down salaries, cut down unimportant expenditures or delayed those expenditures to next year. So this is very important. Dividend payout. So there is no way a regulator will allow you to pay dividend to your shareholders if you have a shortfall in any of these key ratios. And we have seen that some banks in the past who tried to announce dividend payout, regulators asked them to take back the announcement. So this is one of the key aspects which impact your shareholder, and you have to be very careful in dealing or announcing these dividend payouts. No management bonus, so all the senior management definitely get impacted. Reduce credit limits, so you reduce the credit limits. So you have already seen banks reducing credit limits on credit cards or overdrafts, etc. So those you have to actively follow. Sale of investment portfolio. So this could be a step. This should be a step which you don't typically do in such scenario. Otherwise, you might have to take a lot of haircuts. Rundown of interbank placements. You have to take care of your interbank limits and these placements in terms of what you forecast your liquidity ratios to be. Sell loan portfolio to asset reconstruction companies. So this depends, or securitize it. It depends on the regulations of that particular country. Or continue to raise customer deposits at higher rates. So a lot of banks we see come out with good plans for senior sections of the society or for particular sections so that you get more additional current and saving accounts deposits, even though at higher rates, and a lot of interbank borrowing. So you not only you have to simulate what could be the impact. So this is a kind of iterative exercise. So you take this management action, again go back to your computation and simulations, again compute the risk metrics. Then if you think then if there is a shortfall, again do certain management actions and again simulate it. So it's an iterative exercise till you see that these key metrics are in your control. So not necessarily you have to carry out all these management actions. You can have a plan for this, but you have to simulate and show to the regulator and your board that, okay, after we take these actions in near future or maybe in a year or two, then our key metrics will be back to the level, and you need to present this to your central bank. So this gives an overall picture of how an integrated stress testing framework looks like. Let's discuss whether it is so easy that it looks out to be. So those of you who would have computed stress testing exercises, you know that it's not that easy that it looks to be. So though the stress testing exercises or the frameworks that we have seen that evolved in last decade in terms of coverage and sophistication, many of you would face this problem that they remain largely compartmentalized within key risk types. So IFRS 9 being dealt by credit risk or finance, ALM is again with treasury or market risk or finance. So a lot of these frameworks are still compartmentalized, and there are many of the financial institutions like team to coordinate within these departments and have harmonization across all of this. The other challenge that we see in stress testing is your risk models and data are scattered across multiple platforms and often Excel sheets. So this is a problem which is more severe with the large banks who have the legacy models and legacy systems. So where you have your wholesale credit data in some system, retail data in some system, ALM data in some system, and so forth. So one of the key challenges, either all these systems need to seamlessly talk to each other, or you need to migrate all of this data or models to a single stress testing engine or model deployment engine. The other challenge that we face, especially in emerging markets, is that banks are still following the standardized approach for capital computation, whereas they have started to use internal models for stress testing and management decision making. So one of the example is credit risks, where you follow the external ratings based risk weight assets for capital, whereas for internal decision making, stress testing, ICAP and IFRS 9, you follow rating models and PD approach. And similarly in market risk, you may be following the standardized approach, but most banks for internal decision making follow complex VAR models. So all these approaches make it difficult for the teams because you need to understand which approach you want to use for which purpose. Ideally for stress testing purpose, the more sophisticated the approach is, more accurate result it will give. But at the same time, you may see that your regulatory capital is not moving much because your external ratings are yet to see downgrades, but your internal ratings have moved a lot because your internal ratings we have already downgraded. So a lot of these discrepancies you may find, which makes the overall exercise a bit challenging. And you also see that as we were talking of the compartmentalized risk types, we see that all these analytical frameworks that have come in the recent past are housed within the different teams of the bank. So IRB approach for credit risk, IFRS 9 again for provisioning of credit risk, interest rate risk in banking book, which requires you to do stress testing for 6 different types of rate shifts, not only the parallel shifts. ILAP, which allows you to do complex liquidity stress testing, ICAP and stress testing. So often these are owned by different teams. Often these are carried out at different times of the year. So stress testing could be semi-annual in some geographies. Typically IFRS 9 you are doing quarterly. So you need to manage the timing, or the budgeting you might be doing once a year. So different exercises are carried out at different times within the banks and financial institutions. So you need to bring the harmonization. You need to have clear-cut plan of how to integrate all of these into your stress testing. Then in terms of dynamic balance sheet, so gone are the days when you are carrying out any analysis on a static balance sheet. In times of COVID analysis, when you have to simulate the moratoriums, you have to simulate the runoffs, any kind of static balance sheet assumption would not give you any accurate picture of impact of COVID-19. So you need to have a very dynamic balance sheet model to be able to incorporate all the assumptions within to your stress testing framework, whether it is business as usual or the forecasts. So because your static or the contractual cash flows are not going to hold in the current scenario, as you would have seen in the last quarter. The other is many regulators are not comfortable of allowing diversification benefit or assuming intra-risk correlation. So the silo-based approach where you are analyzing a lot of these risks in silo and then trying to add them using some sort of diversification benefit or correlation is not allowed. So integrated stress testing will allow you to take all this impact into these key risks. We will discuss all of these components. So these are some of the challenges, and we will discuss now each of these components of the stress testing framework on how to tackle these challenges. So going into data model. So one of the key villain of any kind of analytics or regulatory reporting practice is data. So it is a key scapegoat whenever regulator asks for any report or management asks for any report or any analytical framework is being pushed. One of the key excuses that typically banks come up with is lack of adequate or quality data. So it is very important that banks pay a huge importance on the data quality and accuracy and adequacy, and they spend a lot of effort on collecting this data, because as we say that garbage in and garbage out, so you don't want your entire exercise to throw out the results which your business cannot relate with. The other important aspect is what kind of granularity at which you want to capture the data. So most idealistic scenario is you capture your data at most granular level, which could be facility or the customer level. But in some cases we have seen, especially like retail, where banks pull in the data of the customers at product level. So the more granular you go, the more accurate analysis you can carry out. But of course you have to consider the limitations of your databases or of your stress testing engines. One of the key thing you have to see is what data you require and for what purpose. Often we have seen that bankers collecting a lot of data without knowing what they want to do with it. So your team get lost into a lot of these data sheets. But I think you need to have a clear framework in mind that, okay, for credit risk, if I have to do impact on my credit risk, I need my customer info, I need my PD info, I need recovery and CCFs or any other kind of staging criteria, early warning. Or if you want to do liquidity or interest rate risk, what kind of data I need. So do I need repricing profile, or I will generate my own repricing profile? Do I capture the cash flows, or I start with the liquidity ratios, etc. Similarly, for your collateral data or for your operational risk data, for market risk data, whether you are looking at the overall portfolio or you are looking at the deal level data. So you need to understand the granularity, you need to understand the purpose of that data. And in addition to that, you need a lot of dimensions of your data, so that, for example, your branch code, geography code, customer type, so that you can drill down across these dimensions, and or maybe channel, which channel is currently giving you better result in terms of more loan growth or those kind of these factors. So you need to capture these data as granular as possible so that all the metrics can be computed within the stress testing engine itself. In practice, it is very difficult to get a golden data source for all the required parameters. So you need to identify how you are going to capture these data, what all relevant source systems you are going to use. When we say source systems, also account for various Excel files that are scattered and owned by different other risk or finance departments. So how you are going to combine them, how you are going to reconcile them. Some of them could be quarterly, some of them could be annually. So let's say you have a plan, budgeting or annual budget plan, which was drawn out in November or December, and now you want to rerun it. So you need to assess what you do with mid-year. So you need to understand what granularity you need, at what frequency these numbers are being captured. All of these need to be clearly laid out in your what we call data model or data requirements sheet. So this is just a pictorial representation of some of these data points. As I said, may not be very exhaustive, but this gives you an indication of why you need any kind of a data. And what are the implications, let's say, if you don't have that data, how it is going to impact my computations. So that should be very clear in the mind of stress testing personnel. So as we said, once you have the entire data, the next step is designing of the scenarios. So one of the key trend is to define certain idiosyncratic scenarios and certain systematic scenarios. In the current scenario, as we see, COVID-19 is the most interested scenario which everyone wants to assess. Management wants the results based on COVID-19. So as we said that you can draw on from your historical experience. So if you had witnessed any kind of pandemic in the past, so like for Southeast Asia, MERS or any other kind of pandemic, though it was not as severe, you could get some hints from those past impacts, and you can also hypothetically conceptualize your own impacts. So when you design scenario, it is typically in the form of crisp and qualitative statements which are short. So for example, if you have a mild scenario, so these are from a paper which we wrote last quarter. So this may seem a bit dated, but the idea is to give you how you want to design these scenarios. So typically managements would define a summary, or the economist would define a summary statements that, okay, what happens if COVID-19 crisis starts getting milder from Q3, for example, or let's say all lockdown is lifted in Q3 and the travel is resumed from Q4. So, or do you see a mild global recession, or do you see 2 quarters of revenue loss in your customers' book? You see 1 quarter of salary loss in your customers, or what kind of major events that may be cancelled. So for example, if you have a tourism economy, if any major event is being cancelled. So for example, in UAE Expo being postponed to next year, in Saudi Hajj for international passengers being cancelled, or in Bahrain Grand Prix. Similarly, for different countries where the tourism or any major impact events are cancelled, Olympics is cancelled, for example, or delayed in Japan. So these kind of scenarios you define in the statement terms, in terms of mild, moderate, severe. So this is a job typically in small banks done by the stress testing manager or risk manager, but in large banks, they have a specialized team led by economists who come up with these kind of commentaries, or this can also flow from your management committee meetings. So once you have these kind of scenarios designed, the next aspect is how you further drill them down into risk factors, or how you link it with various risk factors. So one is the scenario, let's say recession, but what do you mean in terms of quantitative indicators? So you may have different scenario like scenario 1, 2, 3. So all these qualitative scenarios have to be broken down into micro risk factors. So your micro risk factors could be rating downgrades, PD, or IFRS 9 stage migration, your corporate exposure defaults, sector default, financing rollover, drop in collections, deposit runoff, any stalled projects because of COVID, let's say, valuation losses. So as we see in COVID-19, probably all of these will tick off, and you need to see all these factors combined impact. So one of the key tasks for a stress testing manager is to maintain an exhaustive list of indicators in the database, not only the historical, but you also need their forecasted values. So you have to prepare the forecast of all these indicators which are relevant to you or relevant to that scenario. So you might be doing at least 2 or 3 scenarios. One could be COVID, one could be global recession, one could be any other specific scenario. And you see which are relevant to all of them. So when you execute COVID, it means we have to shock all these factors at a go. So when you have to shock these factors, that is to get the impact on current balance sheet, but at the same time, you have to forecast these factors for 3 to 5 years. So for forecasting, you can refer to various central bank publications, IMF publications, or any reputed research reports, or there are some expert data providers that we see in the market, so you can subscribe to them. So again, as I said, this task is best suited for an economist. It avoids any conflict of interest because often we see that if the risk manager carry out this task, they don't see the severity as the economist can see, and often their focus is to pass the test. Whereas if the person who has no interest in conflict of interest, he will give you the true picture of these forecasts. So economist is typically a best suited in any bank to give a forecast of these kind of indicators. If nothing is available, then the best is to have a meeting with your senior management and at least forecast. So one of the key exercises that banks are now doing is they are revising the forecasts that of all these indicators. So the forecasts that you had in December are no longer valid. So after COVID-19, you have to forecast these in various scenarios. And typically it is advised that you capture these indicators at least at quarterly frequency and not at annual. Because if you capture it at annual frequency, your modeling data points become very less. So we always advise you to at least capture them on quarterly and if possible on monthly frequencies. Some regulators also provide the forecast of key indicators. So if regulator has provided the forecast, it is best to use those forecasts at least for 1 or 2 scenarios, and then you can combine them with your own scenarios. But at least you use some of these regulatory driven forecasts. In majority of country, regulators shy away from providing these forecasts because then market perceive them in different way. For example, in US, Fed once kept the negative GDP growth, and when they announced it, the market fell, assuming that the Fed is forecasting the negative growth in the country. So considering all these aspects, regulators shy away from giving the actual shock value or the forecasted value. So it is for each of these management of the financial institutions to choose these indicators. So once you have these indicators, you have scenarios, and now how do you link it with both and how you take the impact? So you know that, okay, I would consider negative GDP growth for 3 quarters, or low oil price for 4 quarters, or high inflation or high unemployment. So once you have that, how do you take the impact on your book? So one way to take the impact is, okay, I don't link it with macroeconomic, and I directly see my PD will be increasing by 4%. But that is not ideal statistical way to do it. So best way is to have econometric linkage of macroeconomic drivers to risk and business factors. So what do we mean by that? In your IFRS 9 exercise, typically would have analyzed how GDP or any other factor impact the default rate of your book. So oil price and GDP are example. You have to carry out your own analysis to see how different default rates are driven by which factors, how the portfolio deposit run of rates are driven. So these could be driven by interest rate, these could be driven by unemployment, or as I said, these could be primarily or could be driven by the support programs. So which all banks are routing the support money of the bank, and do customers fear that some of these banks may not survive, so they are moving their money from smaller to larger banks. So various kind of factors you can bring, try to develop these relationships. The credit growth, so how do you see the credit growth depending on GDP or fiscal spend? I see some of the questions are coming, but we would prefer to take these questions towards time. We have ample time. Today's session is intended for 90 minutes, so definitely we have a lot of time left. So in terms of prepayment rate, so what kind of prepayment rates you see in your loan book, in your mortgage book? As we have seen that the rates have fallen, so several customers may try to get these loans refinanced from other banks. So all these relationships you have to determine. All this will also determine how accurate your stress testing is, how integrated it is, and how statistically driven this exercise is. So you have to identify and map all the risk and business factors. So we are also talking of business factors like credit growth with all these macroeconomic indicators that typically the management may be looking at. So you can map them one-to-one or many-to-many, depending on how statistically relevant these relationships is. So you typically carry out certain time series analysis or linear regression analysis and see the fitment of these equations. So based on that, these relationships are determined. These can be also judgmental. So if you don't have enough data or you don't have enough sophistication to develop these relationships, management can sit together and from their experience, they can say, okay, if my GDP comes down by 1%, what will be the increase in my default rate? So that can also come from management judgment, but you need to bring it down. If it's coming from management judgment, ideal is to take minutes of those meetings for any kind of audit. Some of the banks also try to buy the third-party consultant reports, but then they are not customized to your portfolio behavior. So a lot of these relationships, econometric relationships between macro factors and your risk factors exist in your IFRS 9, interest rate risk in banking book or ICAP exercises. So you need not reinvent the wheel and develop them again. Of course, you need to test them whether they are still valid after COVID, but you may still borrow them from your other risk frameworks. And you need to also identify what could be the various interlinkages among various kind of risks. So not only these risks typically manifest in isolation or in silo. So you have seen a reputation risk or a large operational loss may translate into reputational risk. It may translate into deposit runoffs and so forth. So you need to see how different risks are getting translated. So what are the interlinkages between any credit or liquidity risk, for example? So any large stress in the customers will mean rollover of your payments, which would mean your cash flows getting delayed or your liquidity getting hurt. So a lot of these things you have to consider. So the firms who don't have any revenues as of now, you will see if they have operating accounts in addition to loan from your bank, you will see their deposits or their balances getting finished in near months. And you will see that you are getting hit from both deposit side as well as from the liquidity side, from the credit side. So similarly, you have to consider what are the interlinkages between various risk types. So to make sure that your impact of any risk event is not double counted. Some banks we see that they count, they do liquidity stress testing in which they count the prepayment analysis, they count the rollover of financing, and similarly they do reputation risk impact where they also again count what could be the impact of reputation. So often these events are linked and you have to have a complex workflows or interlinkages when you do the computation to make sure that no double counting is happening and how all of these is getting captured. So the impact of your credit defaults is not only on your NPA ratio, it could also be on your future cash flows, which you need to capture in your repayment profile of customer. So these were some of the key building blocks that we were discussing in the stress testing framework in terms of data model, scenarios, indicators, risk and business factors. So as we said, once all of these building blocks are there in place, then the key challenge is to simulate and compute risk metrics. So we'll discuss how to simulate when we discuss later on what could be an ideal stress testing engine be it. So before we go into that, one of the key aspect is in terms of key metrics. So what all key metrics you are simulating, whether you have any risk appetite statement where all these key risk metrics are mentioned, and do you have any appetite defined for stressed and business as usual scenarios for all each of these ratios. So you need, and in stress testing exercise, typically you need to see all of them in integrated fashion, and not only the impact of credit on NPA, but if there are any impact on liquidity and vice versa. So if there are impact of liquidity on your funding cost or on your credit rating, which may have any other impacts you need to capture them. The key aspect is management action. So as we've seen, large DSIB banks have their recovery plans. Almost all of the bank have contingency funding plan, which they have tested. So a lot of these management actions are also defined there. So you can also align with your recovery plans, especially for DSIB banks, and also the contingency funding plan. So considering in overall, this is an integrated stress testing framework that that basically encapsulates all these aspects. Though it looks a linear workflow, as we have seen that it could be iterative, where once the limits get breached, you have to again change your assumptions and make sure that or have certain management action plan inbuilt. So now I'll hand it over to my colleague Satya, who will take you through how to execute this in an integrated stress testing. Over to you, Satya.
Yeah, thanks, so when designing, integrated stress testing engine, while it is important to incorporate all the aspects that Vibhor just highlighted, but the way that they need to be brought into any model needs to be logically thought out. So what we have highlighted here are the key components of an ideal stress testing engine. Starting with the data module. So the functionality of a data module obviously is to bring together various disparate data elements, starting from your portfolio positions on and off balance sheet items, including your assets, liabilities, loan portfolios. On the liability side, your customer deposits, bank deposits, other borrowings, and off balance sheet items like swaps, interest rate, derivatives that you use to hedge your balance sheet, and other contingent items like limits and LC/LG facilities. Now, the module should not only be able to capture these elements, but also be able to perform quality assessment checks and should be able to reconcile the balance sheet to the published statements prepared by finance. So that will ensure that from an audit perspective, from a reconciliation perspective, that the numbers that come out of the engine are actually reflective of the the current balance sheet positions. The second aspect of ideal IST engine is the scenario designer. Given the integrated nature of these risks, it would be practical to have a single place where the scenarios are defined, rather than assuming different assumptions for each risk in a different place. So scenario designer essentially lets you define the the product structures, including your your new volume assumptions like the repricing nature of the products, the repayment structures, the tenor assumptions, the pricing assumptions, and what kind of growth can be expected, the credit growth that can be expected during various macro scenarios. In addition to that, customer behavioral factors like prepayment rates, rollover rates, runoff rates need to be brought in. And in addition, from the credit side, your PD models, LGD models that Vibhor just highlighted in terms of various equations, and not just from a factors that are driven by systemic or macroeconomic factors, but also the scenario designer should enable the bank to specify a number of what-if scenarios, specific to each risk factor. So, for example, they should be able to model what will happen to various risk and return metrics if my runoff levels increase by X%. So let's say your historical average runoff rate observed in your current account portfolio something around 7 to 8% on a monthly basis. But because of COVID, you want to apply an additional COVID overlay of an additional 5%. So in order to be able to do that kind of testing, the scenario designer should enable the linkage of each of these risk factors to the underlying balance sheet elements. And it should be able to define how each of these risk factors impact the cash flows on a dynamic basis. So as you roll over from month to month, how each of this factor impacts the inflows and outflows. And then the third aspect or component is the balance sheet module, which essentially enables you to forecast the cash flows based on the imported data from the data module and as per the scenarios defined in the scenario designer. Obviously, you would start with developing the contractual cash flows based on the existing outstanding transactions on your book, and then start applying the assumptions that have been set up in the scenario designer. So let's say in the scenario you have defined a horizon of 12 months, where you have divided the 12-month horizon into 12 modeling periods, and each month you have specified certain assumptions on various risk factors. So as you evolve this your balance sheet over the 12-month horizon on a month-to-month basis, you should be able to apply the individual risk factors, for example, in terms of runoff. So let's say the current level of current accounts in your balance sheet, you take them and you apply the runoff factors applicable for the first period of the stress period. And then as you move to this second period, you restate your entire balance sheet, just like how you have recomputed post runoff, what would your current account balances would look like. Similarly, you look at what were the expected cash flows that were supposed to come through in the first month on the loan side. You apply your PD models, your delinquency models, your prepayment or rollover assumptions that you would like to extend credit lines to certain customers. So taking into these factors, taking into account all these factors, you would then understand what is the net cash inflow into the bank during the first stress period. So that would allow you to say, okay, at the end of the second period or at the beginning of the second period, so this is the outstanding amount I have. And given how the scenario plays out and given how certain customer draw down on limits, so these are the new positions that I need to add back to the positions. So these could be simulated positions based on the assumptions that have been set up in the scenario designer. Now, as you roll over, the balance sheet, so you restate your balance sheet and the cash flow statement and the repricing statement at each point in time. And you link a number of the metrics like LCR, NSFR, interest rate risk metrics like NII sensitivity, economic value sensitivity, or even leverage ratios, and using certain assumptions. You could even compute the full P&L based on assumptions in terms of your operating expenses, fee income, tied to the number of transactions that you wish to originate. So the balance sheet module should essentially be able to restate your balance sheet in terms of your cash flow statement and repricing gap statement, and be able to recompute all your liquidity, interest rate risk, FX, funding metrics on a period to period. And once you know the baseline cash flows at the end of each period, you should be able to feed them into the next module, which is the ECL calculator engine, where the engine would then take the assumptions from the scenario design in terms of the PD models, LGD, EAD assumptions that you have configured, and use the regulatory guidelines in terms of IFRS 9 or CCL guidelines to project the ECL losses, and in the process also derive the lifetime and 12-month ECL numbers. And obviously, certain the module should be able to give option to the user in terms of defining their own stage assessment rules. As the cash flows go through period on period, you would know what is the delinquencies observed at transaction level, and based on that, the ECL module should be able to do the stage assessment, and then based on that compute the lifetime and 12-month ECL. And the next, aspect would be the risk weight computation. And here, the module should be able to compute risk weights across, risk categories like credit, market, and operational risks, incorporating both standardized and advanced approaches. And of course, I mean, there are always additional aspects to look at, like the collateral and credit mitigation aspects and optimization of collateral, which then get included in the final mitigated risk weight asset computation. So once all these, in terms of the balance sheet metrics, the credit metrics, and the RWA projections, which lead to the computation of the, capital adequacy measures, then are fed into the consolidation module. So each module would ideally have its own result base, which then gets consolidated in terms of the regulatory disclosure reports, in the specified formats, or management, reports, and also have option to consolidate, various loss numbers observed across, these models and across scenarios, and, add up the numbers in terms of giving a probabilistic loss forecast across the scenarios. So essentially, I mean, this would then lead to a dashboard which would summarize the results of, the analysis. So with this, we would then, look at how, what kind of deployment options are available for, such an engine. Ashley.
Thanks, Satya. We have the next couple of slides talking about potential deployment options that a bank or a financial institution has to take this entire IST framework that Vibhor and Satya just described into an ongoing stress testing program, so as to speak. So if you look at legacy stress testing programs, most of these stress testing programs were spreadsheet driven. And the demands of the erstwhile stress testing regimes were typically demands were of only about sensitivity analysis. They did not really want granular results to be shown. The what if demands that were placed on the stress testing framework was limited, so as to speak. And there was no real requirement for building scenarios on the fly. So in that kind of an environment, these spreadsheet models typically work. But now the kind of impact and demands being placed on stress testing engines and what if scenario engines is, senior management and regulators want to see on the fly impact of changes in macroeconomic conditions. They want to look at not just changes in individual risk parameters. The earlier stress testing regimes focused, primarily on capital adequacy ratio, and on the stress testings on the liquidity side, it focused primarily on the liquidity coverage ratios, the NSFRs, etc. And these were two independent tracks that were run as part of the stress testing program. Now, the engine and the framework that Vibhor and Satya was describing, it's about bringing all of these silo-based tracks into one unified stress testing engine. And to be able to pull off such a stress testing framework in a spreadsheet-based environment is almost impossible, because it provides, it's almost impossible to demonstrate any of the tenets of BCBS 239 risk data aggregation and reporting requirements. It's impossible to show accuracy, timeliness is a question mark. Ad hoc reporting is not possible. Demonstrating integrity and explaining the results is also not possible. So the need, we feel is that for an ongoing stress testing program, the bank has to invest in a technology architecture that takes into account the needs and the sophistication of its stress testing program. So the next couple of slides talks about a couple of deployment options. Vibhor, yeah, if you can move into the next slide. And really what we're trying to look at is the translating the various building blocks that Satya had shown as part of the IST engine, and to see in an IT environment how these play out. So six major building blocks if one were to look at it. There is the data module, which Vibhor had shown in detail. And he'd given a drill down into the various data requirements of such an IST engine. There is the scenario designer module that is one able to define sensitivities in case the scenarios are primarily sensitivity based scenarios, be able to combine various scenarios and scenarios slash sensitivities, and be able to translate those scenarios into shock transmission mechanisms. Then there is the consolidation module being shown here, which is essentially a module that that brings together the results of the various scenarios being put into the engine and results being presented. There are three other solutions that form the key to a successful stress testing integration program. One of which is the balance sheet management solution, and this really is a combination. I mean, this could be your budgeting systems, your ALM systems, or your cash flow generation systems that you probably use for IFRS 9. And then there is your IFRS 9 ECL calculator itself. It may or may not use the ALM systems or the balance sheet management systems for its cash flow generation and for EAD computation. So we've shown the IFRS 9 ECL calculator as it's the key module where the loss provisions especially on the credit side are being determined. And then there is the RW calculator, depending on whether the bank is on a standardized approach or on a advanced approach or a foundation IRB approach. The methodology varies. Now, in the earlier stress testing regimes, what used to happen was that the three main solutions, the balance sheet module, IFRS 9 ECL calculator, RWA calculators, they all exist within the banks in earlier regimes also in some form or the other. But the stress testing program, because it had very limited objectives, it never tried to integrate with all of these applications or solutions. So the stress testing program was run independent of these three solutions. This resulted in banks looking at stress testing results primarily from a top-down approach, because for bottom-up account level stress testing, if you wanted to say look at impact of rating downgrades of particular customers, or repay or rescheduling of rescheduling in amortization schedules of particular accounts, it really is not possible to do that without true integration between the stress testing modules and the other solutions in this particular chart that we've shown here. So banks ended up doing a very top level approximation of results, and they looked at results in silos. Impact on capital adequacy, and then impact on liquidity ratios through different scenarios. So this is option A in essence, and majority of the banks currently are in fact in option A, because they're just coming to terms with moving to an integrated stress testing regime. Most, even if they have systems in place, or if they've invested in stress testing engines in place, the key modules that should be drivers of a stress testing exercise still exist in silos. So this is the least preferred option when it comes to an IT deployment or an IT strategy around stress testing. So this is option A according to us. Option B is the Vibhor, if you can move to the next slide, a slightly more sophisticated approach when it comes to option B, which is a partially integrated stress testing. And while the three key applications, the balance sheet management, the IFRS 9 engine, and the RWA engine, exist outside of the stress testing engine in itself, there's some level of integration. What we refer to here is some banks, what they've attempted to do is run the baseline computations the through the three key solutions, but for these stressed scenarios and for the other what if scenarios, they use an approximation to come up with the stress testing results. So some level of granularity and accuracy is maintained when it comes to the baseline numbers, including current as well as projections. But when it comes to what if scenarios, again, it loses the accuracy and granularity there, because they end up using sensitivities rather than doing a full portfolio revaluation, so as to speak. So again, slightly better than the earlier option, which was primarily completely disparate and completely decoupled set of modules and solutions. Here it's slightly more integrated, but really what banks should be aspiring to move towards is deployment option C, which is a fully integrated stress testing. And by fully integrated stress testing, what we are referring to here is one single data model that can drive all of the other modules that are related to stress testing. So this covers within this the integrated stress testing architecture would have one integrated logical data model that would feed the other applications. So you may or may not have invested in some of these applications. Some of these applications probably already exist. There are technological solutions for integrating these solutions, even if they've already been purchased. But what is key here is the integrated stress testing engine and the solution itself should be driven by one consolidated data module with very close integration between the balance sheet management, the IFRS 9 ECL engine, and the RWA calculator. And here what you will see is you will be able to get results at the most granular level, which is at an account level or at a facility level that you would want to see results in. So any scenario that you choose, you do not have to look for shortcuts or sensitivities, and you can go the most granular path in terms of obtaining the results for stress testing. So if there is say a scenario that says movement in macroeconomic conditions lead to an increase in probability of default in your tourism sector by say 5%. So you'd be able to identify each and every customer within the tourism sector, be able to stress the probability of default for each of those customers. In case the IST engine is able to look at changes in repayment schedules basis changes in macroeconomic conditions, then you'll be able to build that into your overall system also, and be able to see the results. So deployment C, in our opinion, is
Actually, there is some disturbance. I think we can't hear you well.
Oh, okay.
No, it's fine.
I'm almost done. I was just about to hand it over to you for the concluding slides.
So I think what we discussed today was the problems in stress testing, the key components, the key factors on what you can focus on in terms of COVID-19 impact, the key components, how an ideal stress testing engine look like, and how to deploy an stress testing framework within your organization. So as a concluding remarks, what I would like to emphasize again is that the market has shifted towards sophisticated analytical models and its linkages with risk management and business decision making. So unless you have an integrated stress testing solution, there is a missing link between risk measurement as well as the decision making. So it serves an important link to combine the both. We have seen that banks and financial institutions struggling with silo-based stress testing. The institution who had already implemented such programs, they are quickly able to simulate the changing condition in the market and quickly able to feed into their management decision making. So it's the need of the hour that banks review and update their existing stress testing and analytical framework, be it various components like data, models, resources, governance, and tools. Obviously, I don't think there is any point that all banks know that they have to at some point in time shift from existing tactical Excel spreadsheets to a more robust analytical framework or a solution. And as you know that in current times when we are dealing with daily black swan events, we can't wait for the situation to become normal to decide next course of action. So stress testing is the best tool which allows you to simulate the future. You can have multiple future and plan for the same. So you need to equip your management with an integrated stress testing solution, so which can quickly simulate the balance sheet based on various future course of action and define the various steps. So we conclude here, and I think we have some questions. So would like to focus on some of the questions that so far we have. So so you can type your question if you have in the question and answer window. So one of the questions that we got was the COVID impact, which we discussed. So one of the questions, Ashley, I think you can better answer it, is what methodologies, I'll go to that slide here. So what are the methodologies which can banks use to assess the econometric linkage? So Ashley, you want to take this?
Yeah, so the idea here is to not build an independent, to not build another stress testing engine in silos. So the idea is to assess if you already have such loss forecasting loss forecasting tools within the bank or not. And currently in the IFRS 9 or CECL regime, most banks do have IFRS 9 models in place and the idea is to integrate the stress testing engine with the IFRS 9 models. If not available, then you would want to look at rebuilding or building such econometric relationships between macroeconomic variables and your loss numbers. And there's several ways to go about building this. You can go the simplistic route, which is to establish relationships between identified macroeconomic variables and say loss norms within the bank. You can use the Basel framework, which is to look at it as as a relationship between macroeconomic variables and probability of default, loss given default, and EAD, which is the route that most banks with their IFRS 9 models have taken. Again, a range of methodologies available. You can write from heuristic based methodologies, which is expert judgment based methodologies, to other methodologies like OLS, linear regression based methodologies, time series based methodologies like ARIMA. So a whole host of methodologies there you can use. But again, key here is to, if you already have some loss forecasting infrastructure within the bank, to use that for your stress testing purposes also.
Yeah, I think, thanks. And to add to that, what you can also do is there are a lot of free tools now available. Like our team uses a lot of R or Python, where these equations are very easy to model. So you can use a lot of these are open source and freeware tools, which you can use in addition to Excel to run this kind of analysis. So the next question that we have is, how should we calibrate the existing model to avoid data disruption caused by COVID? For example, there are deferrals in place. Okay, so for that, I think for deferrals in place, again, we have to, as we said, that you have to consider in credit risk whether your credit ratings, the base credit ratings, let's say you are running this exercise on June, whether they have already incorporated some of these impacts of deferrals or they are yet to incorporate. So if these ratings have incorporated, you can still use a combination of bottom up, which is you have already degraded the scores of the customers or the ratings of these borrowers, and then you can combine them with top down sector level increase of PDs. Or you can also monitor these sector level growths. So if these are, you're talking about corporate borrowers. So one of the approach that we have seen banks doing is they also look at, so these models are linked to GDP growth, for example, and they see what is the growth witnessed in these sectors and what is the forecasted growth in each of these sectors. And then they use a combination of bottom up and top down approach. Similarly, if you have collaterals, if your data is not updated in terms of collateral valuations, you can use some top level assumptions for real estate or for any other type of collaterals, be it stock market, so how much the stock market has fallen, and you can upgrade them and apply at top level, at the portfolio level, these kind of assumptions. Satya, can we do something similarly on liquidity side for COVID?
So in terms of deferments and payments, primarily, so if you have the option of assuming delay in payments or a risk factor defined in terms of this delay in repayment or deferment in repayment. So essentially the entire timeline of the cash flows need to get pushed by whatever is the number of deferrals that have been opted for. So from a liquidity perspective and interest rate perspective, this is how. In the balance sheet module that we discussed, we said that at each modeling point, the balance sheet gap statements and the repricing profile will be restated. So in a dynamic approach, it is pretty straightforward to see that the entire cash flows would be shifted by the period of deferral, and then based on that the computations are carried out, and you would directly see the funding shortfalls, the gaps, and the impact on NII and the liquidity ratios from that. And also the next question in terms of what key balance sheet lines to be considered under dynamic balance sheet assumptions. So on the asset side, you have your interbank placements, which are usually where bank parks excess cash. You have cash and high liquid securities, which are used to meet all the obligations and meet the deposit runoffs. And then you have to model your working capital facilities and term loans separately, preferably, again, retail separate for retail and wholesale exposures. And so these are the key, lines on the asset side. And on the liability side, of course, you would have your, current and savings accounts, again, classified between retail and wholesale portfolios. I mean, this is at the highest level. You can obviously go to a much more granular level. But because the way retail and wholesale customers react is quite different, and also it depends on the nature of the product. For example, current accounts versus savings account, the objective of these products is different, so they would typically react differently. And similarly, you could have a modeling on wholesale term deposit rollovers and redemptions in retail term deposits. So this covers the customer deposit base, and then you could also look at your repo funding, the stability of your repo funding, and also the term borrowing. So these could be the key balance sheet lines that you would consider under a dynamic balance sheet analysis.
Thanks, Satya. So we have another question. How normal and logical is it to have different stress testing assumptions for regulatory and internal use? So Ashley, you want to answer it?
I see it's from Irfan. Hi, Irfan. All stress testing regimes, are regulatory plus. So primary requirement could be regulatory driven stress testing. The parameters may or may not be provided by the regulator, but there will always be and should be company run stress tests also. So there should always be, the scenarios should actually be identified by the bank for reporting to senior management, and that in fact is one of the requirements of BCBS 239 as well. In jurisdictions where the regulator provides a prescriptive stress testing approach or scenario, like in UAE and in the US, for instance, while the scenarios are provided by the regulator and that submission needs to happen, the expectation really is that the banks go beyond that and assess for itself what are more pliable or possible stress testing scenarios that are relevant for its own portfolio. So company run stress tests should always be run as part of the stress testing regime.
Yeah, in fact, in UAE, we have two stress testing regime now. So one stress testing exercise is carried out as part of ICAP, which is being driven by the supervisory team of Central Bank of UAE. And we have another stress testing exercise being carried out by the Financial Stability Unit. So these two, one of them is carried out in end of Q1 based on December numbers. The other one is carried out end of Q3 based on Q2 numbers. And both of them have completely different objectives. And we have seen some banks submitting primarily the information that is asked and nothing extra. But whereas for their internal analysis, they do a lot of interesting and complex stuff which may not be submitted to regulator at a time. So like some banks using complex economic capital models, but for regulatory purposes, they stick to standardized approach computations. So this is, I think, quite normal, and we have seen a lot of examples of this. So with this, I think, okay, so there are some other questions. Let me see if I missed out anything.
Yeah. There's another question from Irfan, so you can address it.
Yeah, so what are the methods available to stress for an economic variable for which institution or system doesn't have historical data? So I think one of the key example is we said that we can use judgment or we can use external databases. So we have seen banks subscribing to certain external databases where they provide certain historical data. Or the other is to have a judgment. So certain new financial institutions who don't have data, but let's say they have senior executives who have their own judgment that, okay, what is the relationship between default and GDP, or what is the relationship between runoff rates and interest rates. So these kind of factors, as a thumb rule, even if you have, you can use them. And it is more easy to use them in your internal exercises. In external exercises, if you want to use judgmental analysis, it is best to document these, that as in when you discuss in some appropriate committee and consensus was achieved within the senior management on this relationship, and you note it down, so that in case of any audit or regulatory exercise, supervisory exercise, you have some proof that, okay, this was a combined result of, let's say, 100 years of experience of 5 or let's say 200 years of experience of 3 to 4 executives of the bank. So this way it brings a lot of confidence that, okay, this is based on experience. So we have seen even in advanced geographies where banks have used external people. So let's say for recovery rates, we have seen banks documenting the external recovery agent's view or the legal company's view and using them in their regulatory models for LGD or regulatory models for, let's say, LGD or stress testing. So these are very much possible. Then so there is another question on, I think this could be for Ashley or Satya. How do write-offs affect the income statement and balance sheet in the IFRS 9 ECL stress testing? So Ashley, you want to take this?
Sorry, what's the, okay, how do write-offs
affect the income statement and balance sheet in the IFRS 9 ECL?
This really is an accounting question. I don't think I'll be able to answer this.
So, and this, I think, changes from country to country, right? A bit.
Yeah, I think it's more a question for the auditors, and I don't think I'll be able to answer this.
So you are running your IFRS 9 ECL on your current book, right? So on your primarily on stage 1 and stage 2. So for which is a performing book, and for non-performing book, typically you either the banks use regulatory provisions which are driven by some formula, or you estimate using your own LGD and PD. So we have seen in emerging markets banks resorting to regulatory provisioning guidelines for stressed assets, or which we call stage 3 assets, which may include these. And in terms of their treatment, I think that may differ from country to country. So that's to answer that. And then in terms of next is a request to share some template. So we'll share these slides and we will not be able to share template, but we will definitely share the slides and recording of this seminar with the participants so that they can watch later and share with their colleagues. So I think we have come to end of the seminar. Thank you all for joining. We look for your feedback and inputs. We are also planning to organize more sub-webinars in near future. We have one tomorrow on operational resilience. So if any one of you is interested in participating, please feel free to contact us for registration. The links are provided on our LinkedIn social media handle. So thanks everyone. With this, we'd like to close the session. We have a lot more interesting articles shared on our website, on some LinkedIn videos being shared on our YouTube channel. So keep a tab for all of these to follow our updates. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.